Kirby Smart, Stacy Searles, and the Georgia Bulldogs pick up a big-time commitment today on the offensive line in four-star Kelton Smith out of Carver High School in Columbus. A big deal for a lot of reasons. Number one, they need to get things going on the offensive side of the football on the recruiting trail, and they add another one of the best offensive line prospects in the state of Georgia. Of course, they have two on the commit list already, Bo Hughley being one of them, who I think is the top offensive tackle prospect in the state of Georgia, and Joshua Miller from Virginia, I believe, 6'5", 320 pounds. So they're bringing in size, and Kelton Smith is going to add to that. 6'5", 300 pounds, can play tackle, can play guard. I think guard is where he will end up at Georgia. But this is a kid who, if you turn on the tape, can be really physical. He's strong in the upper body, going through a little bit of a knee injury right now. So he's been having to deal with some nagging injuries kind of throughout his high school career. So he's still a question mark for me a little bit. I'm not so sure I'm as high on him as other people in the industry, but this is not a class that is full of dynamic and impactful offensive linemen, guys like Broderick Jones, Jamari Sawyer, Andrew Thomas. There aren't a lot of guys who you can sign and say, okay, we need you to play right away. So I do think everyone that they sign in this 23 class on the offensive line might have to wait at least 1 year, maybe 2 years, and then possibly see some playing time in year 3, because they have recruited a lot of offensive linemen in the last several years. If you think back to last year's class 22, they took 5 guys, and they're all really big dudes. If there's one thing that Georgia continues to recruit at on the offensive line, it is size. Of course, Ernest Green was the headliner in last year's class out of California, 6'5", 330. If there's one guy or one freshman offensive lineman who could see the field, maybe early on, even though I think Georgia has the best starting, well, maybe not the best, but one of the best starting offensive line units in college football, it's a loaded group. So I don't think Ernest Green is going to see a ton of playing time. Maybe at the end of games against Vanderbilt and Samford, whoever. But he's 6'5", 330, and he's one of the best young offensive linemen on the roster. Aliyah Ball out of IMG Academy, 6'5", 325. Jacob Hood is just a massive, massive dude out of Nashville. High 3-star kid who still needs to continue to develop and work on his fundamentals and technique. But he's 6'8", 340. Put him in the WWE if football doesn't work out. That is a massive human being. Drew Bobo, 6'5", 300, which is the exact size that Kelton Smith is. Another versatile guy, could play tackle, guard, maybe even center. I think he's smart enough too. He's got the intelligence. He'd be a big center though. And then Griffin Scroggs, a guy who's one of the lower-ranked offensive linemen that they signed last year. He's 6'4", 315. So Kelton Smith, as big as he is, and he looks like a giant out there if you turn on the film against the competition he's playing against, but he's really not as big as a lot of guys that they've signed on the offensive line in recent years. Look back to the 2021 class. Amarius Mims still doesn't look like he's going to break the starting rotation, and he was a top 10 player in the country that year, and a guy who I think has NFL potential. I still believe that. I still think he has first-round potential, but he's got to crack that starting lineup and then show that he can do it. But I still think he has a bright future. He's 6'7", 315. 315 is probably the lightest I've seen him at since I've been covering him. Micah Morris from Camden County, he was a high 4-star guard. Saw him play multiple times, 6'4", 315. Dylan Fairchild, right next door to me at West Forsyth High School, saw him play more than anyone in the industry during his high school career. He's 6'5", 300. So again, right at that size as Kelton Smith is. Played some tackle at West Forsyth, but he's a guard all day long in Athens. If I were to compare Kelton Smith to anyone on the roster, it would be Dylan Fairchild. I'd say he's a less athletic Dylan Fairchild, but Dylan Fairchild was a 2-time state wrestler champion and did it with ease. I mean, he dominated guys on the wrestling mat. And so I think he has a bright future as well. And Jared Wilson, another guy who I think the staff really likes, one of the lower-ranked offensive linemen, actually the lowest-ranked offensive lineman that they signed in that 21 class. He's 6'4", 325. So all these guys are massive, strong, giants, really. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Georgia has one of the biggest, largest offensive lines in college football. Maybe not this year, but next year moving forward, because everyone they're bringing in is just huge. So Kelton Smith, he's a guy who I think is fundamentally sound, kind of knows what he's doing a little bit. I want to see more aggressiveness from him a little bit, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm some offensive line guru. That is the one position group that I have a lot of trouble scouting, because I was not a big dude. I did play a little ball when I was younger, but I was a safety. I didn't play the offensive line. I wasn't on the defensive line. I was one of the smaller guys on the team. So I really have to work with sources and trainers and coaches to say, hey, what does this guy need to work on? He's big and strong and he's dominating everyone he's going up against. That's why he's going to Georgia. But where does he need to get better at? And then you talk about, build, motor, athleticism, length. There's a lot that come into play. And I think Kelton Smith has potential to be a nice little player for Georgia, but he's not a guy that I see coming in and making a big splash or starting as a sophomore. I mean, maybe he is a guy who provides depth and can get in there when he needs to and be a serviceable backup. If a guy needs to take a few plays off, gets banged up, he's a guy who I think later in his career could come in and fill that role. I think he's a guy who can take reps at tackle and at guard. But it's not like he chose Georgia over Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson. So he's not super highly ranked, but he is still one of the best in the state of Georgia. And nationally, again, there's just not a lot of great offensive linemen out there. And I think that's why they tried to load up a little bit as much as they could, especially in the last two classes. So, again, they've got 3 on board, which is good, and they're guys that have potential. They still need to get on campus, continue to develop and work. None of these guys are finished products. They're actually far from a finished product. But when you look at what they could become, I think if they continue to develop, then you could have an offensive line like the one we're going to see this fall, which I think is going to be one of the best in college football. I think Broderick Jones is going to be your left tackle, and this could be his last year. If he has a good year, I think he could be a first rounder in the NFL draft next year. Xavier Truss, I think, could be an outstanding left guard. Just another massive guy who can open up lanes in the run game. I think still needs to work on his pass protection from the left guard spot, but that's a guy that they can probably run behind. Cedric Van Pran at center, becoming one of the team leaders, not only on the offensive line, but across the board in the entire locker room. Maybe the best center in college football. He's excellent. He's going to have a monster season. Tate Ratledge was injured pretty much all last year, only played like one series before he got hurt against Clemson. The staff likes him. There was a reason he was a borderline 5-star 3 years ago. If he's healthy and ready to get out there and compete, I think he's going to be an outstanding right guard this year and be a huge benefit to this offensive line. And then you have Warren McClendon, multi-year starter, one of the most underrated players on the roster. I think he has a bright NFL future as well, but this is going to be his 3rd year in a row starting at right tackle. And you don't hear much about him because he doesn't do a lot of things wrong. You don't hear him getting called for penalties. He doesn't hold. He consistently does his job every play, and he's going to be one of the best right tackles in college football. So you might have one of the best left tackles in college football. You probably have a top 3 center in college football. And then Warren McClendon, one of the most reliable right tackles in college football. If Tate Ratledge is the guy we thought he was out of high school and Xavier Truss takes that next step, he's been on the roster for a while now. So I think this is going to be his best year. And then Broderick Jones, he was a 5-star for a reason as well. And then, in his 3rd year playing left tackle, this could be the best offensive line in college football. I definitely think it's going to be top 5, probably top 3. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a group that could be the best in college football. So these guys, when they get to Athens, they get better. There's no doubt about that. Of course, Sam Pittman was the best offensive line coach that Georgia's ever had. Matt Luke did a great job. Now you have Stacey Searles, who a lot of people thought was an underwhelming hire. It's kind of bounced around a little bit. North Carolina's offensive line wasn't that great recently when he was there, but he's a player's coach. He's a guy that gets his guys ready to play. He needs to get these guys prepared. He's got a lot to do as far as getting these guys who have a ton of potential to reach that potential and become possible starters and help. Georgia's offensive line has become one of the best in college football year after year after year, thanks to Sam Pittman and thanks to Matt Luke. They have to keep that kind of tradition going. This isn't your Mark Richt offensive line groups that were good. They were okay. They were never great. And they were full of medium 4-star guys, an occasional 5-star guy like John Theus, and a lot of 3-stars. And some of those 3-stars, David Andrews, Ben Jones, they turned out pretty well, right? But at the end of the day, you want to fill this group with as many 5-star guys and high 4-star guys as possible. And they're on the roster. Stacey Searles has to just continue to do his job and get those guys ready to play and get them to a point where they're playing like they were ranked, like we thought they could be coming out of high school. So Kelton Smith is the big commitment today. Again, if you've been on Dog Post, you kind of saw this coming. He chooses Georgia over Florida State, gives them their third offensive line commitment in the 2023 class. And I think more good news could be on the way, guys. So make sure you stay tuned to everything we have, either on YouTube, Instagram. We're trying to do big things on TikTok now. So add us, Dog Post, on TikTok, Instagram. Of course, continue to follow us on Twitter, and make sure you're on the website to read the latest and greatest. We got lots of coverage from SEC Media Days. I'm editing commitment stories all day today. I think Georgia could get some good news on the recruiting trail. So make sure you're staying up to date. Thanks for watching this video as always. Stay tuned to the next one coming up on Dog Post, and I'll see you on Dog Post. Thanks a lot.